Welcome to Employment Connections. Tonight's topic is resume and cover letter writing with JAWS. We are pleased to have Khadija Barry from Vision Services for the Blind in New York with us. And people who registered prior to the start of this webinar the day before should have documents that were sent out so that you can follow along. If you registered after that, we can provide these documents to you. And I'll put my email in the chat. You can email me directly. My name is Lori Scharf, and I'm part of the APH Connect Center, and I focus on careers and employment. And Khadija, take it away.
Thank you so much, Lori. Good afternoon or evening, everyone, wherever you are. I'm on the East Coast in New York, so it's definitely evening for me. My name is Khadija Bari. My pronouns are she and hers. Just a quick self-description of myself. I'm a woman of South Asian descent with a medium to deep skin tone. I have long black hair, straight hair, and dark brown eyes. And today I am wearing a striped button-down shirt, and it's really nice to be here with all of you. I'm personally blind as well, and I am a JAWS user. So that is going to be part of this presentation today. So as you go ahead, please.
Oh, no, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, so as all of you probably read in the description of this webinar, I'm not going to be teaching JAWS key commands today, but I'm going to be referencing important do's and don'ts to keep in mind when preparing your resumes and cover letters for applications. Go ahead, Lori. Did you have something to add, Lori?
No, go ahead.
Okay, perfect. So just going to start sharing my screen and the audio as well. So just bear with me, please. Okay.
For APH-enter.
All right. So what should be on the screen right now is a sample resume that was sent out to everyone as part of the documents for this webinar. So I'm going to talk about the resume first and then move on to the cover letter. So I'm going to start with the general sections of a resume. And I apologize if you hear a few notifications with JAWS going in the back. I'm going to be mindful of that. So the general sections of a resume are your name and your contact information, your professional summary, which is also called a summary of qualifications. If you are a college student or a recent graduate, typically your education section goes next, followed by your work experience. However, if you are further along in your career journey, your work experience takes priority over your education when someone is looking at a page from top to bottom. And skills, I'm totally flexible. Sometimes people add the skills section right below the professional summary, and sometimes people add it toward the end. I typically tell the clients that I work with here at Visions that if you talk to 20 different professionals about what a resume should look like, you're going to get 20 different answers. So there's definitely some principles to keep in mind, but nobody's going to, let's say, deduct points if your skills section was further down the page than further down at the bottom. So I work with blind job seekers on a daily basis, and there's definitely some things I know that are harder to pick up with for those of us who do use JAWS or a screen reader versus someone who might be analyzing content visually. So I'm going to share some principles that you should keep in mind when editing your documents with a screen reader. First of all, the font size. The smallest font size you should be using on either a resume or a cover letter should be 10. Nothing smaller than 10. It becomes difficult to read. There's a statistic that on average, a recruiter spends 8 seconds to browse a resume. And in those 8 seconds, the information needs to be legible. And the layout should be such that they're able to visually capture certain key information quickly. That's number one. Number two, font style. Just use the usual Calibri or Arial. Times New Roman is considered slightly less accessible. But Calibri and Arial are the best practices, I would say. Either or should be fine. There are definitely ways to save space on a resume. So typically a resume is a page. If you have a lot of experience, you can stretch it to 2 pages, but absolutely no more than that. Because like I said, that 8-second number, 2 pages beyond that, it gets to be too much. And at that point, you're starting to capture information that's perhaps not as relevant as you might think for it to be. So a rule of thumb, I would say, is approximately 10 years of experience to a page is a good rule of thumb to go by. So to keep information on a page, there's definitely some formatting tricks that I use on a regular basis. One of them is, like I said, shrinking the font size to 10. Another trick can be to reduce the line spacing to 1.0 in Microsoft Word or Google Docs, whatever you're using. By default, Microsoft Word comes with 1.15. You can also change the page margins in the layout menu to narrow, to maximize more space to be utilized on the page. And something that I do see happen very often that is an error is the paragraph spacing. So by default, if you open up a Microsoft Word document and you hit the Enter key to move into the next line, to start typing into a new line, by default, Microsoft Word picks that up as paragraph spacing. So when either after you're done typing all your text or when you're starting off, it really doesn't matter. But what you want to be mindful of is you have removed all paragraph spacing. I personally do that when I'm working on any document. So for example, I'm going to just scroll through the resume template I have up on the screen. So we have Adam Smith right at the top of the page, which is the name of our candidate here. Adam Smith is a larger font size than the rest of the page. So typically your name is in a larger font size. So let's say if the rest of your text is font size 10 or font size 11, the name can be 16 or 18 points font size, and that's totally fine. And then right under Adam Smith, I have
New York, vertical bar, left parent 212, right parent 123-1234, vertical bar, link, alex.smith@gmail.com.
Oh, sorry, there should be Adam Smith, but it's fine. So you heard New York, which is the city and state where Adam lives. You heard a phone number, and you heard an email address.
Adams, New York, vertical
and
bar,
you
left
also hear a vertical bar, which is typically right under the backspace key. If you hit the shift key and press that, you'll get a vertical bar. So this is just to divide the text. This is also another space-saving technique. You do not have to put your entire street address on a resume. It's also not considered necessarily safe because your resume goes to a lot of different places. You put it out there and on a lot of different websites and application portals. For the purposes of a recruiter, just your city and your state on your resume is absolutely enough information.
And that's just to protect your personal identifying
Absolutely.
information. And that's something that's really come about probably, I would say, within the last 8 years.
Yeah, definitely a lot of phishing happening out there, and
Mm-hmm.
you know, you want to protect your information. So phone number, there are times when I see two phone numbers on a resume, sometimes a landline and a cell phone number. Keep one. If your cell phone number is the number you are most easily reached at, that is the phone number that will be on your resume. Absolutely nobody is going to spend their time trying to reach you on two different phone numbers. And then email address. Email address needs to be professional. No funny words, inappropriate words, sleepygirl95@yahoo.com. None of that. I also typically discourage people from putting their birth year in their email
Yes.
address. A lot of people tend to do that. Again, you're just trying to keep your identity and your information free of any kind of bias that a human may come across. So you can pick up to 4 to 5 digits if you really must have them in your email address. Anything more than that can create room for error if someone is retyping your email address anywhere. I also ask people in this header section if you want to add your LinkedIn profile, you can. Do not add the entire URL of https://w whatever. You can create a hyperlink. So you can just write the words LinkedIn profile or my LinkedIn profile or my LinkedIn, highlight it, add a hyperlink, and that will be sufficient. Whoever wants to will be able to click that to access your LinkedIn profile. I wanted to take this opportunity to also talk about applicant tracking systems, ATS systems. So these are softwares used by companies to screen resumes. So as much as we would hope that an actual human being would read our resume, a lot of mid-size and large-size company use these kind of softwares to pre-screen resumes, eliminate resumes that have spelling errors, grammar errors, don't have enough keyword matching to the job description, and only bring forth the relevant ones to the human personnel. I typically discourage people from using preset templates. So there's resources available online where you can download a template for a resume or a cover letter, and you can, you know, replace the information, edit it, and type your own. The reason why I discourage that for JAWS users is sometimes there's like a table with certain rows and columns that is already inset into that template, that Word template for the resume. And sometimes as you're typing information, the width of the columns or the height of the rows tends to change. And unless you're looking at it visually, it's very difficult to assess what is what. If you would have to go through every cell, it'll be a lot. So I actually encourage people to start with an absolutely blank page. And if you have the components that I mentioned earlier, you'll be fine. The important part is consistency. And that is really key in the formatting of a resume. So as long as your entire document is the same font style, and I'll talk a little bit as I go forward about particular formatting of each section, but that's really key, is the consistency portion of it. So going back to what I mentioned earlier about removing paragraph spacing when you're editing your resume and even your cover letter, I would say, if that's something you would prefer. I personally really like to hear that blank that you just heard when I am in a blank line. So when I remove paragraph spacing, I know this blank means exactly the height of one blank line versus the gap between a paragraph to another, which is usually a bit larger. And it's really hard to detect this when you have your paragraph spacing on. I'm going to pause here if we have any questions yet in the Q&A.
We do not.
Okay, I shall move on. All right, so like I mentioned, the next section after your name and your contact information is going to be your professional summary or your summary of qualifications, as it's also called. Before I talk about a breakdown of that, when I mentioned applicant tracking systems, something I actually learned from an article that Richard here at APH shared with me about the topic was there's also an option to add like headers and footers in any document. So sometimes people tend to create a separate header for their resume or their cover letter on the page and add that information there. Applicant tracking systems actually sometimes do not capture information if you have a separate header section on your document. So it's actually not necessary. You can simply, at the very top of your page, have your name and city, state, phone number, email address at the very least, just typed out at the top of the page without necessarily adding a separate header to it. And if you, in terms of making it look pretty, you can just center align it, and that should be enough. Yeah. So let's talk about section headings. So the first one, like I said, was professional summary. Other section headings include education, work experience, skills, and even interests. I've heard are a good one to add to give a little bit more information about yourself, especially if you're sort of early in your career journey. Might be a good way to also spark a conversation with the interviewer. So section headings, again, you can choose whatever you feel like for the formatting, as long as you use the same formatting for every section heading. So over here, for example, professional summary, I have it.
Professional summary.
Let's see,
Blank. P.
So P is capitalized. My JAWS goes into slightly higher pitch. And then ROFF. So the rest is lowercase. So just my P and S of professional summary are capitalized. You can capitalize all of it. I also have it underlined. You can also underline it, make it bold, do both, do all three, whatever you want to do, as long as you do the same thing for every single section heading is really what's important.
P, motivated and service-oriented administrative professional with an M.S. in organizational leadership and communications and over 3 years of experience delivering clerical support, program coordination and community engagement across government, education and nonprofit sectors, adept in case management, records administration, and client outreach.
All right. So this was the professional summary for this particular candidate who is looking to grow into administrative work. So certain things when you're writing your professional summary, and I'm going to scroll back up so you can hear that again line by line. The purpose of a professional summary is like a snapshot for whoever's reading your resume to know what to expect on the rest of your page. It's literally a summary of your qualifications. Things you want to capture in your professional summary are if you have related years of experience, how many. Quantifying is really important on a resume. when you look for a job, typically in the qualification section, they will tell you, we are looking for 1 to 2 years of experience, 3 to 5 years of experience, whatever it is. So the manager already knows this is the level of experience I'm looking for, and I can put a number on it. Therefore, when you are typing out your summary of qualifications, you are saving the manager trouble of reading through the rest of your resume and doing the math. You're doing the math for them. So they're like, I'm looking for someone with X numbers of experience. And look at that. This person does have that number of years of experience. So that's something that's really helpful. Your education and let's say bachelor's, master's, whatever it is, and your major, especially if it's relevant to the position that you're looking for, are also helpful to mention. This is also a good place to use a few of your key skills. So if someone, let's say, is looking for clerical or administrative entry-level work, they can talk about, let's say, maybe they're looking to bring my strong Microsoft Office, if that's what the job posting says they're looking for, my Microsoft Office skills, written and verbal communication skills and organizational skills to your organization, to your company, for example. So you're using a few key skills, not all of them, in your professional summary as well. You also can take this opportunity to highlight if there are certain work environments you have worked in. So let's say you've worked in schools or summer camps, or certain populations you have worked with before, like children or older adults. What you really want to make sure is that this professional summary is tailored to the position you are applying for. So if, for instance, the company you're applying to serves children, maybe it's a daycare, mentioning that in the past you have worked in a summer camp setting can be helpful, just to show the reader that you have worked in youth-based organizations before. Now, if you were applying for a clerical position working at a senior center, stating in your professional summary that you've worked with children in a summer camp is not necessarily helpful, because it's not relevant to the work environment you are now applying to. So, yes, go ahead.
But you could say that you have worked closely with families or parents or something along those lines.
Absolutely.
So you're still highlighting your work experience, but just a different angle of it.
Absolutely.
So I just want to remind people that you can either put your questions in the chat, or we could probably do raised hands if necessary. What are you thinking, Katie?
That should be fine if people can't get to the chat. We do prefer chat or Q&A, but if you can't, we can do raised hands.
And okay, go ahead, Kadisha.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm just going to scroll up real quick so that everybody has a chance to hear that professional summary that I have in the sample that was provided to attendees line by line. And if you like, you can also open it up on your own device. That's totally fine with me too. So I'm just going to scroll up.
Engaged, motivated, and service-oriented administrative professional with an M.S. in organizational leadership and.
So it says it's a motivated administrative professional with the Masters of Science, basically, in organizational leadership
and over 3 years of experience delivering clerical support, program coordination, and community engagement across government, education, and nonprofit sectors, adept in case management, records administration, and client outreach.
Okay, so you heard a degree, you heard years of experience, and you heard some key skills that this applicant has like doing record keeping and client outreach. And also they have identified that they're a clerical professional. Sometimes I see in resumes people saying things like, looking for an inclusive and supportive employer. That's not necessary to add to a professional summary. Everybody is typically looking for that kind of employer. Sometimes I also see people write like an objective statement instead of a professional summary. I still see that a lot on resumes. And again, like I said, you talk to 20 different people and it's going to be 20 different responses, but I personally don't like objective. I like the summary language more for a resume because it's key highlights of your qualifications. If you speak another language, especially if you're in the United States, Spanish, that's incredibly valuable. And I would say you can add that to the professional summary as well. And then, of course, if you are applying to an organization that serves a certain demographic and you speak their language, definitely add that to your professional summary as well. And again, be mindful of this is tailored to the job you're applying for. So if, for example, the job description says need to have a typing speed of 25 words per minute, this is actually a good place to write down your typing speed as well. Whether this should be in bullet points or a paragraph, I have a preference for neither. I think both are fine. But what you shouldn't be doing ever on a resume is writing in first person. So you never say I or my when you're writing your resume. It's always in third person. So you shouldn't say I am a clerical professional with 3 years of experience. No. You can just, even if you just write clerical professional with your 3 years of experience, that is sufficient. Okay. So that was the professional summary.
Blank.
And blank, again, indicating that there is a gap on the page before we move on to the next section heading.
Core competencies.
So
From Ellen McCoy.
Core competencies is another way of saying skills. So I'm going to pause here because I think there may have been a question that came through.
No, just a comment.
Just a comment. Okay,
Yeah.
Great. All right. So core competencies or skills, I have a preference for neither. You can use either language. So the next is actually underneath it is a bullet list. So the reason why we make bullet points on a resume is because visually bullet points are easier to digest, let's say, versus paragraphs where there's a sentence upon sentence, one after the other. So like I said, you can write your professional summary in bullet points or not. I don't have a preference because it's not very lengthy in the information over there. So the skills or the core competencies over here are going to be bullet points. I'm going to go through them one at a time.
Bullet community outreach and public engagement, entering list, bullet client support and case management, bullet record keeping and data entry, left parent cares of NY, right parent.
So Cares of New York here is a specific database that this person uses or has experience with.
Bullet event and workshop facilitation. Bullet Microsoft Office, left parent Word, Excel, Outlook, PowerPoint, right parent. Bullet Google Workspace and video conferencing tools, left parent Zoom, MS Teams, right parent. Bullet typing speed, 52 WPM.
Right, so 52 words per minute because this person is looking for a clerical position. So that was the last one on the list. So core competencies or skills you don't want to add are things like teamwork, hard worker, time management, punctual, good communicator. These are considered soft skills, which are expected of you if you are looking for honestly, even a volunteer position. So you're expected to be coming to work on time. You're expected to be a hard worker. You're expected to be a team player. So I tell people, don't waste the valuable one-page real estate of your resume on your soft skills, but rather focus on your hard skills. So again, this could be a language, this could be different software, this could be certain skills that are specific to the field that you're looking for, such as if you're in sales or in customer service, bringing those strong customer service skills to the table whenever you're applying anywhere. You can also bring these other hard skills to the table, such as curriculum creation, for example, if you've worked in a classroom or educational setting before. So there's so many options to explore, and they can vary by field. It just depends on the field that you are in. And this is also, like, even if you're a college student, you can absolutely still have hard skills to add here. If there are, let's say, if you're a mathematics major, you therefore have certain classes in calculus or something that you've taken that provide you a higher level of numerical technical abilities than perhaps someone who is a non-math or a non-STEM major, for instance. If you use any kind of statistical tools, if you are a STEM major like SAS or SPS or RStudio or whatever it may be, any kind of software, creative major, you know, your Adobe, what's a Creative Suite, so your Photoshop, all of that, it's great places. Social media management is a skill to add if you are looking for an internship or a job in the communication space, and to be specific about which platforms you are confident in being able to help a company manage. So you just having an Instagram account and not really having much activity on there doesn't necessarily give you the skill set to manage a company's Instagram profile just because you have one. However, if you're incredibly active in your own online presence, you try and drive more followers and more views to your content, those are skills, even if you're doing it for yourself, that can be applied to a company if you are, you know, still in college or a recent graduate and haven't had the opportunity to do that for another company yet. I'm going to pause to see if there's any other questions that came through.
Do you have any tips, and you may cover this at the end, I don't know. So if you're planning on it, just save it for then. But I'm just wondering if do you have any specific JAWS tips for setting up your resume?
Yeah, so the errors I see for JAWS users are inconsistencies in formatting, which is why I said when you are reviewing your document, it's really important to be mindful of certain things, like your font style, being consistent, your font size, like for your section headings, whatever you choose to do, all caps, underline, bold, that you make sure you do it for each one. The challenge with a JAWS user is that you have to individually go back to each element, versus perhaps someone who is visually skimming the document and can easily pick out, yep, this is underlined, this is underlined, this is underlined, great, I can move on. So, you know, there's a little bit more scrolling, more selecting of text to make sure that you have consistency in your choice of formatting. Copying and pasting is also a mistake I see sometimes, where discrepancies start to occur in formatting. If you're copying and pasting from one document to another, sometimes the formatting starts to shift and you may have different kinds of formatting on the same page. sometimes I see people label their section headings as header, or like it'll have a slightly different font size than the rest of their section headings. Bullet points also change all the time when people are copying and pasting. So again, you can pick a bullet of your choice. In my particular sample here, I just have the round filled bullet point. You can choose a square, you can choose a hollow bullet. As long as there is consistency in the same bullet point that you're using throughout your document. Does that help, or were you looking for something else, Lori?
Nope, that's good.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so now I'm going to move on to, some people call it work history, work experience section.
Blank exit list. Professional experience.
Or professional experience, as is here. All right. When you are gathering information to fill out in your professional experience, things you want to have handy so that you've done your homework and you can sit down and work on your resume are the name of the company you worked at. You don't necessarily have to include the entire street address of your past employer on your resume, but just having the city and the state is sufficient. You want to know your title. So whether it was a volunteer, intern, whatever job title you had. Over here, if people were, an intern or a volunteer, even as a college student myself, even in graduate school, I did a lot of free labor just to gain experience. So rather than simply writing intern or volunteer, I find it to be more insightful if someone can add like the name of the team or the department that they were a part of. So senior center volunteer at the very least, if let's say you were volunteering at an older adult center or senior center. Summer camp counselor or youth leader or whatever it was, just rather than just simply writing the word volunteer or intern. Even if you didn't have a formal title, like, oh, I was never given a formal title, it was all very casual, that's okay. You can, for a volunteer position or an internship position, just for the sake of your resume, you can add like the department name to your title here on your resume. That just gives the reader a little bit more information before they even move further down on the page of what you were, what your role was, or what team were you supporting. And additional information you can have on hand are the month and the year you started and you ended. So it's really good to keep track of this information, ideally as you are going along. Sometimes, we work with people who don't have a resume, that haven't worked in maybe 10 or so years because they had family obligations come up and it's hard for them to remember. So obviously we tell them to try their best, but having a month and a year is good to have. And then having not a laundry list of what you just did, but your accomplishments or your responsibilities during that particular work experience. What should be on top is your most recent opportunity. So again, if you're a college student or a recent college graduate, I think every experience is work experience. It doesn't matter if you were paid. If you were a volunteer and you had some of both paid and unpaid experiences, that's okay. You're not putting down how much you got paid on your resume. So for those who are early in their careers, I think all of those are valuable work experiences where you can take transferable skills to the next employer. And then, of course, if you do have formal work experience, if you're further along in your journey, you can be more specific. So the most recent experiences, like I said, come up top. How far back should people go? If you have a consistent work history, I would say the last 10 years would be good. Now, if you have certain gaps on your resume, I can talk about that too. Sometimes you'll have to take a break from the job market to take care of personal or familial obligations. That's okay. What you don't want to do necessarily is if you worked, let's say, somewhere in the 2000s, but then you also worked, let's say, in the 80s or the 70s, keep in mind what the purpose of the resume is not to put your entire work history, even if you've been working for a very long time. It's to talk about the experiences that are most relevant to the job you're applying to now. And I work with job seekers all the time who've worked in different sectors, from education to insurance to like even political campaigning. It really, if you have a lot of experiences, you can pick and choose which ones are the most important to the job you're applying to. So again, when we talk about tailoring of resumes, and 8 seconds of attention being given to that one piece of paper, you want to make sure you are making those 8 seconds worth it. So I did hear somebody raise their hand. I'm happy to take a question.
All right, let me. All right, you should be able to unmute.
Hey guys, it's Eli.
Hi, Eli.
Hey, Lori. So just a quick question. So when it comes to laying out the resume with work experience and education in terms of your layout, what would you recommend for someone? It's pretty common amongst the blind and low vision field for individuals to take 10 plus years to get their to finish up their schooling here. So if we assume they went in at 18, right, we can pretty much assume that if we follow that same guideline, they come out with their credential in hand at about 28, 29. So what would you recommend for people to lay out who are maybe early 30s, late 20s? Would you follow the same guideline for the resume layout?
Great question. I was going to address that when I spoke about the education section, but I'm happy to do it now. Another common mistake I see is when people are listing out their education. You do not have to put down when you started your degree. You only have to put down if you're currently in school, your tentative or your expected graduation, or if you have already graduated, just a month and year of your graduation. Yes, go ahead.
And just to add to that, if you are working on a college degree or trade school, you don't need to put down when you graduated high school. You don't even need to put the name of your high school or all that stuff. Correct. Because it's not necessary and it could result in ageism. The other thing is that if you don't know when you left or started or ended all of your jobs, if you don't know the month for all of them, don't put it for some and not others. Just put the year. And you can always contact your employer for that your previous employer for that information, because they can usually give it to you.
That's right. Thank you so much for pointing that out, Lori. Yeah, sometimes I'll tell people like, hey, if you started in April, but you remember you started in May, it's not the end of the world. It's okay. If it's a more fresh experience, and sometimes employers do like checks, they'll call your past employer as part of the background process once you do get a job offer. So that is, if it's a recent experience, it's likely that you'll remember the information or at least you can take note of it after listening to this webinar. Now that you're like, maybe I should start taking some notes when I create my resume or update it. But yes, I also don't prefer it when for some experiences people have a month and then for some they don't, and then they have it again. So you keep a consistent format. Also, when writing down the months, sometimes people use the abbreviated version. So for example, APR for April or SEPT for September, but in other places, they'll have the full word of the month. So these are errors that recruiters are actually looking for to eliminate resumes, are small formatting mistakes like this. Because what does it not show? Or rather, what does it show? It shows that you do not have attention to detail. And a document as valuable as a resume, which you're putting out there to be considered for a job opportunity, even if this one page is not getting your full attention, what kind of impression are you putting across? To Lori, to your point about ageism. So when I was talking about work experience and how far back we should go, again, like I said, the focus should be on the experiences that are the most relevant. And I'm hoping if you're looking for a job in 2025, something that you did in 1985 is not the most relevant experience on your resume. You can focus on things that you were doing more recently. And honestly, sometimes there are volunteer opportunities that you could be doing that we're like, well, it wasn't a job, so how can I put it on my resume? Sometimes we are active with our local community, maybe our church or other institutions, local affinities that we may have that we are actively engaged in. And there are definitely some transferable skills that you can pick up from those places, professional references you can pick up from those places to talk about during interviews. So I would say, at least in 2025, there's no right or wrong answer, but I would prefer if people try and keep it 1995 and beyond, just to avoid any kind of ageism, going back to any kind of bias that we're trying to avoid in a human that might be reading our resume. Okay. So in this particular resume I have up on the screen, I'm not going to scroll through the first work experience for this particular candidate, Adam Smith. So the next thing you should hear is about the job listed on this resume, and I'll talk about how to write that out.
Department of Housing Services, Bronx, 9.
Okay, so the employer of this first work experience for Adam is it looks like it's a government department, and it's located in Bronx, New York, which is considered a city. And then in the next line,
Community Outreach Specialist, vertical bar, September 2022 and present.
Okay, Community Outreach Specialist is the title. And then there's a vertical bar separating it from the time frame when Adam started working here, and looks like he's still working here. So in terms of visual notes, I personally don't mind if all of this information is fleshed against the left margin. For JAWS users, sometimes I've noticed when they try and especially if their skills are beginner to intermediate, which is a good majority of users, if they try and add like tabs or spacings or alignments to different parts of the page, some information on the left, some information on the right, I have seen errors happen. So if you have the JAWS skills to be able to have let's say the job title towards the left margin and the time period you work there towards the right margin, the name of the company towards the left margin, the city and state on the right margin, like that's okay with me if you're confident in those skills. But if you just separated things with commas or vertical bars, or whatever symbol of your choice from the Microsoft Word menu, I think that's fine. But what's important is to not have a variety of formatting errors on your documents. So some people put down this information in reverse. So they may have their job title first and how long they worked there on top, and then the employer in the second line. That's okay with me too, as long as you do that for every work experience on your resume. There's no right or wrong over there. Okay, so below this, like I said, bullet points are visually easier to digest than a paragraph. I have seen resumes where there's a paragraph describing what they did at that particular job, even worse when it's in first person. So that I would say is wrong. You want to, again, make it easy to understand bullet points. Okay, so I'm going to move now into the first bullet point for this government agency Adam works for, what he does there.
Bullet: liaise with shelter residents and primary contacts to promote awareness of DHS housing programs on a monthly enter-in list basis.
Okay, so I'm gonna just have JAWS repeat that one more time.
Bullet: liaise with shelter residents and primary contacts to promote awareness of DHS housing programs on a monthly basis.
Okay, it's in 2 lines, that's why. So again, as you heard, we started with an action word here, which was liaise. So when you're starting these bullet points, you want to start with an action word. You do not want to start with responsible for, because guess what? Each of these bullet points is likely going to be what you were responsible for, or what you were doing. So responsible for is not a very, it's a very passive kind of word. Whereas if you're saying something like managed, oversaw, collaborated with, liaised with, these are more proactive action words. Something also important to note, so in this case, Adam is currently working with this company. So the tense used in these bullet points is present tense. Now let's say Adam stopped working there last month. What right now says liaise will now be past tense. You're going to add a D at the end. If it was communicate, it will be communicated. Collaborate, collaborated with. So that's also an error I see very often in resumes, is people, even if it's an active work experience, they will have it in the present tense. So just being mindful of the tense. Again, this is one of those things when it comes to attention to detail. I have people ask me sometimes, should I put a period at the end of the sentence? Should I not? Again, I have a preference for neither, as long as you are consistent. If you are putting a period at the end of every bullet point, or at the end of a bullet point, make sure you put it at the end of every bullet point. And again, when you're doing your editing, going back and reviewing your resume, making sure you're checking these deeper elements. Is there a period at the end of that? That's how much in detail we're talking about in resumes, and that's how much in detail I go on a daily basis with resumes of job seekers that I support. And this is a pretty common error. You'll be surprised. Okay, so right now this was just the first bullet point that JAWS read. So I'm going to move on to the next one of what Adam does in his current position.
Bullet: maintain accurate monthly records and cares of NI system for 50 clients.
Okay, so there is something we heard here. So I'm just going to have JAWS repeat that again.
Bullet: maintain accurate monthly records and cares of NI system for 50 clients.
So there's 2 words here that jump out at me in this bullet point: monthly and 50. So like I said in the beginning, quantifying is really important in a resume because this tells the reader how often or how much do you currently do or have you done before. So let's say it's a call center and you managed incoming calls or inbound calls. You answered over 50 calls a day. So in case of Adam, he updated records for the customers or clients that he supported, and he did it on a monthly basis. So we're quantifying a time period here. And then we also had the number 50, which tells you the volume of the records he was updating. So quantifying wherever possible. This could be a dollar amount. This could be a percentage. If you helped a company increase sales or revenue by a certain percentage, or brought down expenses by a certain percentage, did some cost savings. I always tell people, don't make up a number here, pull it out of thin air and add it to your resume. Anything on your resume is fair game for an interviewer to ask. So first of all, know everything that's on your resume. And number two, if you put a number on here, be ready to be able to answer to it. So if you say brought down costs for the department by 15%, be ready to be able to talk about how that 15% number came about. If you don't know, it's better to not put that number there. So I'm now going on to the next bullet point of what Adam does at his current job.
Bullet confirm client eligibility in collaboration with case management and housing teams.
So over here, we're talking about how Adam collaborates with different teams as part of his job. So rather than in his core competencies section writing teamwork as a skill, he is in fact demonstrating that more substantively in a bullet point under his work experience. So it's already implied.
Bullet coordinate with providers and stakeholders to support placement and continuity of care.
Right, so that's another one that also highlights teamwork skills in another way.
Blank, exit list.
Okay, blank. So that was the last bullet point under Adam's work experience. I can quickly scroll through the next one and talk about it, and then I'll take any questions if there are any. Oh, go ahead, Lori.
Yeah, I'm just doing a time check, and we're almost at the top of the hour, so we have about a half hour to go.
Okay.
So do we want to move into the cover letter?
I'm just going to finish up with resumes. They're actually more complex than a cover letter. The cover letter itself should not take too much time.
That's fine.
Yeah. Just the nuances that go into, especially formatting errors in resumes. So the next work experience on Adam's resume is
Lavelle School for the Blind, Bronx, NY.
So he worked at Lavelle School for the Blind, which was in Bronx, New York.
Teacher aides vertical bar May 2021 and August 2021.
So you have the title and the time period.
Bullet assisted with classroom instruction and activities for 20 students with visual and developmental disabilities. Entering list.
Okay, so this is the first bullet point. So again, quantifying how many students Adam worked with and what type of population they were.
Bullet managed educational materials and maintained confidential student documentation.
Maintaining confidentiality. Again, rather than just saying you can do it, you're giving here a solid example of how you did it.
Bullet supported individualized education plans, left parent IEPs, right parent and student development goals.
Okay, so a little self-explanatory. So I'm going to
Blank, exit list.
move on to
education.
Next. Now we have our education section. So like I said, if you're a recent graduate or currently in college, this education section will be above your work experience. But if you have some experience already, this can be further down on the page. And the reason is, of course, because your work experience is taking priority for the next job you apply to. So education, so I kind of already jumped ahead with Eli's question over there. So like I said, you want the name of your institution, just like the name of your employer. City and state of where you went to school is enough. And when you graduated, the month and year, you do not have to put down when you started at that institution. That's actually not relevant. And you can also add your GPA. I would say if it's 3.5 and above, you know, that shows you have had a certain academic standing. It's also an opportunity to list out some relevant coursework. So not like, what is this, 100 or 101 classes, not like something you did in freshman year, but something perhaps you did in your junior or senior years of college, where your subject matter got more technical and specialized in your major of choice. So let's see what Adam has over here.
Orangeburg University, Orangeburg, NI.
So he went to Orangeburg University.
Master of Science in Organizational Leadership and Communications, GPA: 3.82 vertical bar, August 2025.
So again, we're keeping that vertical bar. So we're keeping a consistency there, like I said, of how you are dividing up your or listing out your time period for any particular item listed on your resume. So he got his master's degree recently, it seems.
Bullet relevant coursework: strategic planning, organizational communication, crisis leadership, conflict resolution, entering list, team building.
Okay, so those were like 3 or 4 of his most relevant courses. And again, you don't want to list out 12 courses here. Just the top, I would say 5 or 6 are sufficient. And then I think we also have Adam's bachelor degree here.
Smithtown University, Orangeburg, NI. Bachelor of Arts in Communication Studies, vertical bar, May 2019. Bullet James Golding Scholarship recipient, entering list.
So here Adam got a scholarship to attend his bachelor's program, which is also a really nice highlight to have on your resume, because again, it shows off a certain level of excellence.
Bullet Equal Access Club Leadership Awards, left parent 2017 and 2018, right parent.
And he looks like he got some awards as well while he was in his undergraduate program, and he also listed that as some of his accomplishments in his education section. Sometimes people have a lot of accolades and awards, and you can create an entire section called awards and recognitions, and that's totally fine. Sometimes people have certain certifications as well, like if you get your like some kind of Google professional certificate, if you're pursuing one, or anything, your Adobe Creative Suite certificate, there's any kind of certificate you're pursuing. It's also a good place to add that here and call it education and certifications as your section heading. Some people have certain licenses that are required as part of their job, like a licensed social worker, a licensed mental health counselor, whatever it may be. This is also a good place to highlight those. Some people are very active in their communities or have a lot of extracurriculars, so you can have a separate section on extracurricular activities and or leadership. Adam didn't have that many, so he doesn't have that entire section. But again, if you're incredibly active, either on your campus or in your community, you know, you can add that as well on your resume. If you're part of a lot of clubs, any professional associations or affiliations. So again, is there one single resume for every person out there? No. It really depends on what your past and your present look like and where you are in your job search journey. So that's all I have to say about resumes. And I'll pause for a question before I move into cover letters. So I'm going to stop screen sharing.
Alt-S, mute,
and I'm going to
for APH, entering list,
over here the next cover letter sample I have.
And I don't see any questions right now, so.
Thank you so much, Katie. So I'm going to start up screen share again.
We just had one come in.
Okay. Yep.
So someone's asking in the case of certifications,
yes,
should they add when it expires?
If you're really planning to renew it, I would say you can. But if you have absolutely no intention of renewing it, it's also important to then think about, is it relevant to the job you're applying to? And if it is that relevant to the job you're applying to, you should consider renewing it. You know, sometimes something like a teaching assistant certification, I think, expires after 2 years. And if you really are looking for a teaching assistant job, you should look into maintaining that certification. But if you're moving on to something else, it's not necessary to put down on your resume.
But you would list the starting date of the certificate, not the conclusion date. Meaning
When?
meaning like when the certification began, not when your certification began, you wouldn't say like 2029, which it might be the expiration date.
Oh, I see
I
what you're
think that's what
saying.
he was asking, or that's the way
Okay.
I understood it.
That's a great point. I think you would put down when you obtain the certification is typically what I go by. That's actually a question no one ever has asked me. Should I put down the expiration of the certification? That's a good question. You would put down when you have obtained that certificate.
Yeah. And if the certification was an essential part of the job, very often you have to provide a
Right.
PDF or some type of documentation of when that certification was awarded and when it expires.
Okay. So let me just make sure I'm sharing the right file here. Okay.
Sharing me. For AP,
Okay. Are you guys ready,
participants
Jaws?
can now.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. All right, so cover letters. This is going to be a lot easier because there's not as many formatting nuances in a cover letter than there are in a resume to focus on. So right or wrong, I have no preference how to start off a cover letter. Some people copy and paste whatever was the header of their resume as the header of their cover letter. So in case of Adam, we had, his name and New York, his phone number and his email address. And if you just want to copy and paste that as the top section of your cover letter, that's totally fine. Some people like to have their home address up top. Again, it's that matter of confidentiality. It's still considered, like a formal letter or a traditional way of writing a letter. It's not my favorite. My preferred method is copying and pasting the header of the resume. It also shows consistency in the two documents that these are two things that go hand in hand, because what does a cover letter do? It's essentially a cover to your resume. The cover letter is the bridge between your resume and the job description. So you are now taking this opportunity to convince the manager why they should call you in to interview. And a cover letter is tailored for every job opportunity you apply to. You are explaining how the experience and the skills you have are relevant based on what's described in that job posting. And you are explaining why you're passionate or interested in working for this company, which requires a certain level of research you need to have done in order to write a cover letter. So that's how I describe it. It's a document that's a bridge between a resume, which has your qualifications, and the job description, which is what the employer wants. So that's the art of a cover letter. So in this particular template that I have, it's not necessarily for the same Adam that we're talking with. It's a little bit more generalized. So I'll have Jaws read through it.
Left bracket applicant's apostrophe address, right bracket.
So over here, it's applicant's address, whatever your home address is, or like I said, copy and paste the header of your resume. Blank, again, I like hearing that blank line. Being mindful of whatever is your preference when you're formatting a document. So this is more like your standard letter. I like to use a block format where everything is flushed against the left margin. Do you want to indent a paragraph, not indent a paragraph? That's up to you. As long as if you choose to indent one paragraph, you're indenting every paragraph, as I would say the formatting nuance there. Okay, then typically you have the date you are writing
August
this
6th,
letter.
2018.
So in this case, August 6, 2018.
Blank.
And then there's another blank line there. And then you have the employer's information, where you are applying. Sometimes we have access to the name of the manager who will be overseeing you or who oversees the department. If you're willing to do the research, you can also do some digging on the company's website. Sometimes companies have their staff listed out for who is the head of a certain department. And you can actually identify their name and their job title as potentially someone who could be reading this letter. And if you do not, that's okay. If you just know the name of the company, you can look up their office address and you can put that over here. So I'm going to scroll down.
New York Department of Health and Mental Hygiene.
So this is the New York Department of Mental Health and Hygiene.
42-0928 ST.
So we have here the street address written out in 2 lines. So first we have the building number and the name of the street.
Long Island City, 911101.
And then we have the city, state, and the zip code. So again, when you're writing a formal letter, typically this information is broken out into 2 lines.
Blank.
I'm going to blank here again.
Dear hiring manager.
Dear hiring manager. What I discourage people from doing is writing to whom it may concern, because that is very, it's a little bit more cold, I would say, in your approach of writing a cover letter. Because if you have the name of the person, even better. Dear Miss Johnson or Mr. whatever, you can, it's hard to sometimes, predict someone's gender identity as well. So you can also write their first and their last name. You can, don't write good morning, good afternoon, because you don't know what time of day they're going to be reading this. Please don't say hi. Please don't say hello. These are not your best friends. Dear is still considered, a formal technique for writing.
And what punctuation goes at the end of
Oh,
that?
fantastic. I have also heard 2 opinions on this, and I have heard either a comma or a colon. I typically use a comma because, again, it's your usual letter writing that you learned in grade school. Some people have insisted it should be a colon. I'm also fine with that. I don't think it's a make it or break it situation. Yeah.
Blank.
All right, then in this particular case, I have turned off the paragraph spacing. So you're going to hear a blank between every paragraph. And in the case of my sample, everything is flushed against the left margin with no indentation for the start of the paragraph.
I was delighted to learn about the Inspector, Bureau of Environmental Disease and Injury Prevention.
So now we're moving into the first paragraph.
Position at the New York Department of Health and Mental Hygiene through Visions. It is with great interest that I submit this letter of application. I believe my educational background and experience meets the position's requirements. I possess a Master of Public Health, a Bachelor of Science in Biology, and relevant work experience doing data analysis and literature research review.
Okay. This is our opening paragraph. What does the opening paragraph of a cover letter demonstrate? So you want to identify the name of the position you are applying to. When available, typically job postings also have a job ID number or a requisition number. I also typically recommend my clients to also add that next to the job title, just so that the information is on record of which specific job ID you're applying to. So when recruiters look for a job, sometimes you'll notice this, that they'll be hiring, let's say, multiple teacher assistants, but each teacher assistant posting will have its own ID number, and that is the number that employers use when they're searching up a particular posting a candidate has applied for. So I also encourage people to add that ID number in parentheses or something next to the job title. Identify the company name as obvious as it might be. If you found out about this position through a mutual contact, that you are confident that, you know, let's say you have a mutual contact who works there, you've had their permission, maybe they've already put in a good word for you to the manager. You can put down a person's name. In this case, it says that this person found out about the opening through Visions. And in this case, Visions is a partner of this company, so they know who Visions is. And if you don't have to write that part. If you don't have a mutual contact, like I came across this position through your website, it's fine. If you don't have a contact there. You also want, again, just like the professional summary, you want to take this opportunity to give key highlights of your qualifications, any education, degrees or licenses that are relevant that you may have, and just highlighting the key skills that are relevant. So you're sort of setting up the reader to now expect, like, okay, this person checks these boxes. Let's see what else they have to say. The body of the cover letter is 1 or 2 paragraphs, depending on how much experience you have. And this is the explanation, again, building that connection between your qualifications and what the job description is looking for. So this portion will change based on the skills and experiences that particular company is looking for. And it can also change if you're applying to multiple industries. So let's see what this particular applicant has to say in their body of their cover letter.
Blank. I am a highly motivated, results-oriented, compassionate individual who is interested in making a difference and adding value to the mission of the Bureau of Environmental Disease and Injury Prevention by preventing health injuries in the disadvantaged communities as well as in the workplace. By promoting healthy measures, as an undergraduate I enjoyed conducting fieldwork, writing reports, completing forms as well as outcomes of findings. In addition to the above, I have excellent spoken, organizational and written communication skills. I am proficient in various scientific and social services, statistical software such as SPSS, RStudio and SAS, as well as MS Office.
Okay, so
Blank.
Yeah, that's the end of the first paragraph. So they highlighted a lot of key skills over there. They highlighted some technical skills, some softwares they had, and they also highlighted some experience that they did while they were in their undergraduate program. This person, by the way, is a relatively recent graduate. So any project-based experience you may have done in your educational program, if you are a recent graduate, also counts. If, let's say, you're applying to a position that requires research or requires data analysis, and you did that as part of your a project that you did in a course, that also counts as relevant experience for this particular position, let's say. So again, this will really vary from one person to the next, but just focusing on what you have done is relevant to what the employer is looking for. So I'm going to move on to the next paragraph of the body of this cover letter.
Throughout my academic years, I received training in conducting studies and reviewing qualitative and quantitative statistics. While doing my master's at SUNY Downstate, I gained experience in analyzing information and discussing results. Moreover, my work as a volunteer with various healthcare organizations and hospitals has helped me obtain more experience shadowing members of the healthcare community. I believe that my background in public health and my experience in laboratories make me a person who follows the instructions very carefully, makes good reports on experiments, and summarizes data concisely.
Okay. So this person also, because they're a recent graduate, started talking about their volunteer experience in the healthcare industry, even though they haven't had a formal job in that sector before, but they're applying for the Department of Mental Health and Hygiene, which is in the public health or healthcare space. So again, they picked out project work they've done in school, they picked out volunteer experience they've done in school, which makes them a relevant candidate for this particular job.
Blank.
So now moving on to the next paragraph.
Thank you for your time and consideration of my application. I welcome the opportunity to discuss my qualifications in more detail and have attached my resume for your review. Should you require additional information, please feel free to contact me at left bracket applicants contact information right bracket. Forward to hearing from you.
Oh, sorry, it was
additional information. Please feel free to contact me at left bracket applicants contact information right bracket. I look forward to hearing from you.
So this person has their closing paragraph next. I typically encourage people to add a couple of sentences in their closing paragraph, also about why they're interested in this particular company. So especially if you're applying to a local organization in this community, or a city or a county employer, you can talk about how you want to be a valuable member of that community. People here, if you identify as having a disability and you're applying to an organization that serves people with disabilities, you can talk about your passion for giving back to your community. And that is the only place where I would say it's okay to disclose. I guess we could talk about for another hour about disclosure. But
certainly
that's another webinar. Yeah, if you are serving a disability or applying to a disability-based organization, I would say writing in your cover letter that you also have a disability or you're blind is okay, because at that point you are showing lived experience with the population you're going to be working with. Things I do not necessarily encourage in a cover letter is when people talk about their disability because it is their motivator to do well in life. I do not agree with that, because everybody comes from different walks of life and different circumstances. For you, it might be your disability. For another person, it might be their socioeconomic background. For another person, it might be their race. It's a lot when it's just personal circumstances and if it has nothing to do with the job. Now, if you were going to apply to a racial justice organization, yes, talking about why you're compassionate and talking about your identity now becomes lived experience that is relevant to the job. But just talking about it in general because you want to talk about it is not important. Some people say on a resume, Braille and JAWS or whatever, Zoom Text Fusion as their skills or their core competencies. I would say Braille and JAWS are skills if you're going to be, for example, teaching those to the people you're going to be working with. Because Braille is a way of, it's a manner of absorbing communication in a different way than is, someone who might just be visually reading a page is the equivalent, I think of it as. JAWS is a way of interacting with your computer just differently than your traditional click of a mouse. So if you're going to be teaching those things to the population, I would say absolutely it's a skill. You should have it on your resume, you should have it on your cover letter. If not, it's just a way for you to communicate and interact with the world. It's not really a skill at that point. I mean, for me to say I can turn on a computer is not really a skill for me to have on a resume. So that's my 2 cents on that. So again, if your identity is relevant to the job you're applying to, relevant to the company, absolutely you can disclose in your cover letter. Otherwise, disclosing in your cover letter is not your safety blanket for your future potential employer.
Agree.
So, and again, just wrapping it up in the closing paragraph by thanking the reader for their time, that you invite them to call you in for an interview, for you to further discuss your qualifications, for you to have your email address and your phone number, so it's handy right over there for them to contact you. And then ending your cover letter with sincerely. Not, oh gosh, yours truly. I've seen so many versions, but sincerely, again, is considered formal writing. This is a formal document. They're not yours truly, with care or whatever. It's this is a formal document. Sincerely is pretty standard. You cannot go wrong with sincerely. And then you have
left bracket applicant's apostrophe name, right bracket.
Then you have your name.
And your name at the bottom of the letter should match your name on your resume and the top of your letter. It shouldn't be
that's a good
like
point.
you know, if your name is Margaret, don't call yourself Peggy when you sign your name.
That is a great point. Thank you.
And
Yeah,
we
go ahead.
literally have like a few minutes left.
I am done.
So I
I
just
will
want to
stop screen sharing. Yeah.
I just want to ask Richard
sharing
and
meeting alt S.
Katie
Music.
if they have any questions or if there's any questions that I didn't see come through.
Tim Keenan raised hand. Tim Keenan raised.
Yep, we have a hand here. Let me
Audio.
get to that. Sorry about that. Zoom moved on me.
I think there's someone with the name of Tim.
Yes, I have it. I just need to pull it up here.
Perfect.
All right. You should be able to unmute and talk.
Yes, hello.
Hi there.
So yeah, like I just applied as a content marketing specialist for this foundation out here in Colorado. And I ended up explaining a little bit how I was blind because one of the job requirements was to do stuff with video and work with video and like I wasn't sure if, I should come out and address that in the cover letter saying, yes, I can do this. This is 2025. There, here, like I squeezed it into a sentence or two, but you know, just to kind of nip that in the bud or explain ahead of time that, yeah, this is something that a blind person can do. So I wasn't sure about that.
Yeah.
Tim Keenan has lowered hand.
Thank you so much for sharing that. So just by reading your resume or a cover letter, nobody's going to know that you're blind, unless you put it in there. But this is maybe a conversation better had, face to face in an interview, whatever, video, in person, whatever it is. But you don't know who's reading it, and they don't know who you are.
They don't know your capabilities.
Exactly. For them, they're looking at, all right, this guy, he comes with marketing experience. He can, I don't know what your experience is, Tim, but you bring certain educational and experiential qualifications. Therefore, I want to call them in for an interview. If video editing is an important component of the job, and if you feel you cannot do it, I would say don't apply for the job. But if you do have the technologies and the workarounds to be able to do it, just say you can do it. You don't have to say how you can do it unless you're in that interview, which is probably when they're wondering, how is Tim doing it? But before that, it's just a piece of paper that's talking about your skills.
Great. And on that note, we will turn it over to Katie for our closing code.